And we're live. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This is Ask in Israeli Anything, so that's why we're a few minutes late. Israelis are notoriously late. So currently, we're going to start with a panel of 3, but we do have at least two others joining throughout the session. We're going to start just by hearing a little bit about who we have on the panel, their perspective, they're roughly where they are politically. And then we'll get into the questions. We're going to prioritize questions that come in through Discord. So if anybody's watching this either on YouTube, Twitter, or any other platform it's being streamed on, you can submit a question there. But if you want to guarantee your question is addressed, join the Discord. You can see how to do that in the description. I'll also drop a link in chat. And on YouTube, we'll prioritize super chats as well. And with that, let's Adam. So what's up? Tell us who you are and roughly speaking, politically, where you align. I'm not hearing anything from Adam. I think he might be muted.
Yeah, that was just a muting thing.
Okay.
So it's a difficult question, the political one, because I just for some context, I lived in Israel till I was 16. I was born and raised there. Then I moved to the US and I lived here for about 15 years or so, and I guess 20 years now. And then I've been going back and forth to Israel. And the war started, I moved back there, and then the next couple of months I'll be moving there again for God knows how long. So I believe that a lot of my kind of like my values had been built up while growing up there, but a lot of my politics have begun to, I think, like diverge from like the traditional right and left on the Israeli political spectrum. So when I speak to a lot of Israelis, it sounds like I have opinions that are all over the map. So I think I would probably, with respect to the Palestinian question, most Israelis would probably consider me to be a radical leftist on some of my opinions, but on others probably less so. So that's kind of where I fall. It's pretty hard to categorize. I'm not entirely sure. I guess we'll see at the end of the conversation where I fall.
Yeah, I will put it out there that everybody who's going to join tonight is a nuanced thinker and does not fit neatly into any box. But thanks for sharing that, Adam. Noam, how about you?
Okay. So I was born and grew up in Israel, at least more. Other than I lived for a couple of years in the UK as a small child, but other than that, pretty much all of my life in Israel, also till I started this PhD that I'm doing in Europe. And both my parents were born in Israel. My grandparents weren't, but they were in mandatory, they came to mandatory Palestine in the 30s. One side, the other side came in 1945 after the war. So maybe it might matter, or might be important information. And where I lean politically, I would say easier to say that when it comes to social and economic leaning is more left, socialist, a little bit. And when it comes to the conflicts, then in general, I used to be a political activist in left groups like the Labor Avoda Party Youth and high school, and also in Shalom Achshav for a while. And through that, I actually developed a lot of negative attitude towards political activism in general and the left activism. And so right now, I think I could be more center-oriented. I'd still see myself kind of as the left, but I have a very, very strong negative feelings towards a lot of the activist left side of the spectrum. So it might seem that I'm more right or more hawkish, maybe. Even though I have probably a lot more negative feelings towards the other edge of the spectrum from the right side, but that for me, it's taken for granted.
Thank you, Noam. And as I mentioned, we will have one or two more Israelis joining us throughout the session, but I am going to represent whatever position is not currently represented. So to the viewers, if you ever want to see me come out and represent the far right perspective, today's your day. It's going to happen. I'm here to take the perspective of the Kahanist. Anywhere from the centrist to the Kahanist, that will be my position today. So let's get started. The first question we have here in Discord, it is from Hella Confused. Wait, where is it? If you were born Palestinian under occupation without citizenship or a state, what form of resistance would you believe in, if any? Would you resist at all? Maybe you think there's nothing to resist or accept the situation. And do you think that form you chose of resistance would actually work? Who would like to start?
I could start.
Yeah, take it away, Noam.
Yeah. So first of all, for me, answering this, I need to think. So if I'm born Palestinian under occupation, that means in the West Bank or Gaza. And without citizenship or state, could be West Bank or Gaza, or abroad probably in an Arab country.
Yeah, let's think of it. Let's think of it maybe West Bank. Let's take this as a West Bank scenario.
So I guess it depends. First of all, it depends a little bit on how I was brought up. If I would think I'd be more or less the same person, then I would be. I hope I'm objective in this, but I would say that I would be against resistance, certainly against armed resistance against civilians. I would think that, or I would maybe just immigrate abroad with an intent of coming back when the situation becomes more favorable. And if I resist, would I resist? I don't think I would have gone to throw rocks. Maybe protests, or at least start with protests, and then if peaceful protests get shut down by force, then I would just stop doing it, and I would. It's really hard for me to answer, but I would think that I would not be for armed resistance against civilians at the very least, and maybe in general not for armed resistance against such a stronger, let's say, such a stronger enemy.
Thanks, Noam. Adam, how about you?
So, okay, there's a lot here. I'll try to be concise.
Yeah, the more I think we should try to keep responses to around 60 seconds, and that way we could get to as many questions as possible.
Okay, to 60 seconds then. I think there is, okay, so what form of resistance would you believe in? I would probably parse that belief into, do you mean is legitimate or do you mean is effective? Because I think there's a difference there. I think that violent resistance is legitimate. I think it's rarely effective. I think it's more effective to find other modes of resistance. Even with respect to, even violent resistance, I would put that on a spectrum of like more legitimate and less legitimate. So like targeting civilians, I think is less legitimate. Targeting soldiers is more legitimate. But either way, I think both of them in this case and in many other cases, they tend to be pretty ineffective. And it's not always the case, but it often is. I think the way I would think about it is, what is the time scale and how long am I expected to solve this, right? Is it like 100 years or 50 years? Or 10 years. I think I might approach this a little bit differently depending on the time scale. And I think the way I would hope to approach resistance is just to think about things from like an engineering mindset. So who is my enemy? Deeply, who is my enemy? What are they like, and what is holding them back, and why do they continue oppressing me? And try to be as objective as possible. And then try to understand, because the goal here is to fully understand what is driving my enemy. And really to put my biases aside and my own formulations and paradigms aside, and to try to see it for how they see it. So how do Israelis see themselves and why? And then reverse engineer that, right? And so the form of resistance that I would take would probably look more like, hey, how do you try to make the Israelis and the Jews in the Middle East feel very comfortable next to me, so that they don't think that I'm a monster that is trying to kill them at every opportunity? And I would probably start with that, because if you solve that, I think you end up having quite a bit more leverage. And there's a lot more that you can do. And if it's 60 seconds, I'm probably over it, but there's a lot more that I can say.
It's okay. You could, if you want to continue a little longer, go for it.
Yeah, if people are interested in that, I do think that, for example, the clearest way, I think, to destroy Israel, if that were their goal, if that might be my goal, is to get the Israelis to soften a little bit by giving them the feeling that they are not at risk, right? Israelis are just, they're paranoid, and there's enemies around them that fuel that paranoia. And when Jews are scared, the Palestinians, I don't think can be free. So the condition for Palestinian liberation, I think, involves Jewish safety and the Jewish feeling of safety. So I think I would probably proceed with that. So what is it that we can do to make them feel safe? Perhaps we should renounce violence. We'll renounce violence for 200 years, right? And what's going to happen? The walls come down, the fences come down, and Israelis will just slowly melt into the rest of the Middle East. And I mean, just what happened between France and Germany, you would never imagine. Now you just get in the car and you drive, right? Tens of millions of people died between, over the last 100 years. Now it's like nothing. So I think that really trying to make the Israelis feel safe would probably be my form of resistance.
Thank you, Adam. Grocery Man, you're Israeli American, so that's why you got invited up here. Would you like to add something?
Yeah, it was kind of what you're getting at, but I actually don't agree that violence for decolonial purposes doesn't work. I mean, I think most of the time it has worked. It's just that most settler colonial situations have been more standard, where the settler colonists had no historical connection to the land. And so it's very easy to just start killing them pretty consistently. And then they're like, well, okay, this is not worth it right now. I'll just go back to the country, my colonialist country or whatever. I mean, that's essentially what happened everywhere, whether it's France or the other classic settler colonial situations. And kind of didn't work in certain areas like America, or maybe you can say South Africa, just because, I guess America is just more like the Native Americans kind of were just genocided. They didn't really have much capacity to be successful in their resistance necessarily. And in South Africa, I mean, they were there already a really long time before they had some sense of meaningful resistance. But I mean, I don't really agree that I think generally terrorism and killing civilians, any kind of resistance, violent resistance, has worked in the past to kick out foreigners. It's just the issue with Israel is that Israelis don't consider themselves foreigners, so it's just not going to work on them, because they don't believe they have anywhere else to go. They don't have a mother country to go back to, so it's just not an effective way for Israelis to. It's not an effective way to resist the Israelis, and like Adam was saying, it's probably the opposite effect. It's the least effective way to resist Israelis.
Thank you, Grocery Man. And maybe Tad, I mean, I think I generally agree with what many people here said. I can understand where violence comes from when you're oppressed and you don't see clear, peaceful means to achieve your goals. Violence generally ensues. So I recognize where it comes from, but as many people here stated, violence has not worked thus far for Palestinian resistance. It's only allowed Israel to justify security measures which are inherently oppressive, and it's been used to justify further expansion of territory. But what I will say to Israelis, my fellow Israelis, if we don't like violence, then we need to give Palestinians a clear and peaceful path towards achieving their rights, right? Because right now, the first Intifada was primarily peaceful, and we responded to that violently. We have a history of arresting peaceful protesters. So we consistently shut down the peaceful means of resistance, and then we're surprised when they're violent. So I recognize where the violence comes from. I don't think it's effective. I think it's counterproductive. But I think if we want it to stop, we need to change the status quo and give Palestinians a path forward towards achieving their rights.
For the record, that was not the far right position. That's what ours.
Yeah, maybe I need to preface. It's just I actually feel like you guys represented a pretty broad Israeli perspective. Like, had we had a settler here, they may have said something very similar to you guys. And I'm not saying that as a slight.
I think even I think most Israelis agree with that, but I think most Israelis understand where the violence comes from. They just want to stop it. They just want to like resist it very strongly and get revenge for it. I think fundamentally most Israelis understand where it comes from.
My take is that they're a little bit they attribute it to like Islam and not an ethnic conflict. That in their mind it's like Palestinians are just irrational. They're Islamic fundamentalists, and there'll never be peace. So we just need to maintain the status quo. What I've noticed is when you press them on it, it'd be like, yeah, but if all Palestinians were atheist and we still came here and established sovereignty over land that they were living on, do you think they'd accept it even if they were atheist? Or what about Christian Palestinians? So when you press them on it, I do notice they pretty quickly concede that, okay, fine, it's quite understandable where the violence comes from. But I feel like these aren't the conversations Israelis are having. They generally just surface level, just attribute it to Islam or like Arab pride, and it ends there.
Yeah, I guess the first reason would definitely be that. But
yeah,
I mean, I guess if you talk about the oppression motive, I think most of it understand or empathize with it. But that's not the first thing we would say. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, I think by and large, I think Israelis, maybe they used to be able to understand it better. I think it's simply because of a blindness to the occupation. I think more and more of them just see this as a religious conflict and like fueled by anti-Semitism. Yeah. Also, just to the point of the efficacy of violent resistance, where I got my intuition from is there's a section in the book Enlightenment Now that Steven Pinker does like a meta-analysis. So it's just like very statistical, just looking statistically at what are the chances of like violent or non-violent resistance to succeed. And I think it came out to like 70-30. I think it was like, it's a pretty overwhelming majority of resistance that is not violent that tends to be the one that makes the change. But it's
not how those distinctions were made and what was considered a successful versus not successful.
I don't remember that, and I also don't remember if he like subcategorized it based on like resistance to settler colonialism or not. It could be that to settler colonialism, then violent resistance is more effective. So yeah, there might be more like finer categorization. I'll have to look it up.
Right, and
I do know that. Yeah,
I do think.
Yeah, and off the top of my head, I just know the most classic examples of Algeria where that was 100% effective. I mean, they kicked out violently all of the settlers, all of the European settlers. That's what the PNUR.
Yeah, I think
did extremely violently, and yeah.
I think there's a distinction if it's like a anti-colonial movement as opposed to some kind of a civil rights movement from within a society. Because I remember a study from years ago showing that when a civil rights movement or a protest movement is violent, it's not as broad in scope because people don't want to associate with it. But I think it works a little bit differently when it's an anti-colonial
Yeah, and
movement.
I think it's also the case that those, I mean, just look at in the case of Algeria, it's what, like 8 to 10 years of just millions of people. Like, of course, we know those stories a little bit more vividly, but like the case of, I don't know, like neighboring Morocco, I don't think the resistance to a very similar form of colonialism was like nearly as violent, and it succeeded in ridding itself of the colonialist oppressors. And those are just like we just don't read about those cases nearly as much. And granted, I don't know about them nearly as much either, but it's.
I think generally Vietnam is sort of considered successful violent resistance, right? Maybe not from settler colonialism, but at least from invasion. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not so informed on Vietnam, but I think what is interesting though is where we differ, because, and again, this is not me representing the Kahanist position, let's put that out there, but to Palestinians, we are a settler colonialist movement. We're indistinguishable, and they've treated us as such. To us, we're an indigenous rights movement, and our sensitivity to violence, I think, is far greater than other colonialist movements, and our connection to the land and our feeling like we need to maintain this by any means necessary. So I think there's a certain dynamic that is unique to Zionism, that it behaves like a settler colonialist movement to the other native population living here, but to us, we function quite differently from the traditional settler colonizer, and it's why violence is going to be less effective against us than it would be against a more traditional settler colonial movement.
I want to add to that, because this is something that when we were traveling there together, I remember thinking, it's when you have rockets flying over you, for some reason, it doesn't feel political. Like, I'm kind of shocked that as you're experiencing this, why don't more people take a step back and be like, why are they trying to kill me? Why are they trying? It doesn't happen. And I asked Israelis, like, why? And it's like, it's almost like when you're being attacked, it feels personal. It doesn't feel political. From the outside, when you're far away and you see X shooting at Y, it feels like you have the liberty to go and try to ponder the motivations of the different sides. For some reason, it doesn't feel like that when you're there experiencing it.
I think that there's this.
That's pretty.
Yeah, go ahead, Grocery Man.
I think it's pretty similar to how Palestinians experience violence too. I mean, they don't ponder why Israelis are doing what they're doing.
Correct. That was actually going to be my point. We often hear it's like, well, Palestinians or Gazans should understand that the reason we're attacking them is because of Hamas. So the only way to stop that is to rise up against their government. But that's like that's a perspective that's easy to understand from the outside. It's not easy to understand when you're living there. There, it's like, okay, I might not like my government, but the second I'm being bombarded by a much more powerful entity, that my government is suddenly seen as the protector. Traditionally, that's what's happened. If we look at all the other Israel's Gaza operations, Hamas got more popular within Gaza while they were happening and after. This is the first time that public support for Hamas within Gaza has decreased, and I think it's just people are just so fed up. It's been 2 years of misery, of death and destruction, that it's not like they've understood that, okay, Israel's good, Hamas is bad, but it's like there's nothing I could do to stop Israel from killing me and my family. The only possible way to maybe get this to stop is for our leaders to step down. So it's almost like out of desperation. They're so fed up that there's a slightly different realization now. But generally speaking, and I think we're seeing the same thing in Iran now, these attacks, I think, created a little bit more of a patriotic society and strengthened the hardliners. So people don't respond to the people being attacked, don't respond to the same rationale as those viewing it from the outside, I think, pretty consistently.
Should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay. This is a question that somebody submitted on Twitter, and I liked it. This is from Gottfried William Leibniz. I think that's not their real name. How much of Israeli society political views do the rhetoric of politicians like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir represent? Who'd like to take this? I don't even know if we even all need to share on this. It's just a matter of percentage, but does somebody have a good insight on this?
I mean, it should be an empirical question. Like, people will vote for their parties. Maybe not recently, but
yeah. Although I think it's you could very much, like, Smotrich gives a speech and you're like, I like what he's saying, but I still like Netanyahu more as a leader. So I think it would be hard to measure just in that sense. But I guess it depends what they're saying. I'll put it this way. I think that they're definitely extreme even for Israeli standards, but a lot of their messages certainly resonates with a significant portion of the Israeli society. And I think a lot of their message resonates with the majority of the Israeli society. Like when Smotrich is giving a speech about, like, I'll give an example. A few months he was giving a speech how we cannot end the operation in Gaza. It needs to continue. We need to control all of Gaza. Gaza's ours. If we leave, we'll just be back at square one. That's probably around half the population feels similarly to that, right? That's a pretty strong representation. I think Ben-Gvir also, a lot of what he says resonates. They just kind of see him as this kind of like a doofus. I think Israelis are a little bit more turned off by outliers personality-wise than Americans, because I so often hear Israelis say, yeah, we like Trump because he's good for Israel, but what a moron. Like, even my own family members, who most of them are far right, they think Trump's an idiot, even though they do like him because they think he's good for Israel. So I think Ben-Gvir often falls in that category, that they're like, okay, I like his views, but he's like just distasteful type of person. I don't know. Anyone want to add to that?
I think, I don't know if that's part of the question, but I think what people, or what Ben-Gvir and Smotrich say, they wouldn't really stand behind it when push comes to shove, unless they got their own party with a vast majority. Maybe. I think it's more for show, and it's more for the voter base or something like this. It's like a dog barking behind a fence, or like some kind of pie in the sky or pipe dream that they're saying.
That's yeah. Well, actually, no. One data point to support that is all the polling that's been on should we resettle Gaza. All the polling I've seen on it since October 7th has been between 15 to 20%. So it is a minority of the population want to resettle Gaza. So in a position like that, they are the minority. It's a relatively large minority, but they are the minority there.
You may want to, just for the clarity, define what it means to resettle Gaza.
Meaning, yeah, good point. Like build settlements there, move Israeli citizens in there. That's probably,
but like into like Gaza city proper after ethnic cleansing, or like back to where the settlements used to be, right? Kind of like,
yeah, I mean,
like a protective shell.
Back to, yeah. But what is interesting though, like there has been polling that shows that there's majority support for ethnic cleansing. So how do you kind of reconcile 15 to 20% say resettle, 50% say ethnic cleansing?
Yeah, why would you want ethnic cleansing and just keeping the land empty? I feel like Israelis wouldn't go.
It's almost like they're looking at it in yeah. It's kind of like, this is before ethnic cleansing was on the table. I don't know how long it's been in Netanyahu's mind, but in terms of it being a real conversation, it only like Trump moved the Overton window in that sense. Once he shared his relocation plan, it's people started talking about it, and then you do a poll about it. It's like, okay, yeah, I support that. But I think when people are responding to the should we resettle Gaza, it's not in the context of ethnic cleanse and then should we resettle. It's like considering that Gazans will stay in Gaza, should we also then build settlements there? And then the majority would say no.
I think, well, I'm not sure if, I guess it would be ethnic cleansing if you, I think older people still think that a population exchange would be like a fair solution or fair tactic. That's what they saw at least in 48. And so they take all the Jewish people that left Arab lands as the Jewish part of the population exchange, and all the expelled Palestinians as the Arab part of the population exchange. Because 48 was pretty much a war between, I guess, Israel or the Jews and the pan-Arab world, not just the local Palestinians.
But
back then it was considered.
But Noam, where would there be an exchange to now? What would be exchanged at this point, right? Would we send Palestinians to New York, and then the New York Jews would come to Israel?
Well, if you're going that extreme maximalist route, then it's to the Arab states because they are their allies and they are responsible for them, as they were in 1948.
That's the Kahanist position right there.
But it's true. It's not completely made up. I mean, they did fight on the same side.
Yeah,
they did ally with each other.
Right, but that wouldn't mean that if they're ethnically cleansed now, that's like the Arab world's responsibility to absorb them, right?
Well, I mean, at least start with the generational refugees in the Arab states. So basically, against the right of return.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
At least that part.
You're saying end refugee status.
So I don't know if you call that, if you can still consider that ethnic cleansing or not. And now I think some people, I don't know really how many people believe that as a consequence of the 7th of October attacks, that they should, as kind of a punishment, basically be exiled.
A punishment?
Yeah, so
are we talking about 48 or October 7th? Like, Noam, is your position that are you supporting ethnic cleansing now, or you just support those ethnically cleansed in 47?
This isn't my position. This is, I think, the position that I think exists, especially with older people, which I think fits the definition of ethnic cleansing.
Okay.
Younger people would, I would guess that younger nationalist religious people would like to, clear all Gaza of Palestinians and then resettle all of Gaza with complete 100% ethnic cleansing. So maybe that's that 15 or 20% that you said.
That's the thing that I don't. Adel, do you actually have the statistics on it, and do you know what the question was? Because I suspect that you could ask the question differently. You could say, would it be better off if the Palestinians moved out of Gaza? Would it be better off if the Palestinians were kicked out of Gaza? Would it be if the Palestinians were motivated and incentivized to leave Gaza? Or should we make conditions so unbearable that they are forced to flee? Like, each of those, I think you're going to get very different percentages. That's my suggestion.
Yeah, I agree. So there's been two polls from the past few months that have been worded differently that both showed majority support for some form of relocation.
Forced relocation?
For some form of relocation. I'll try to find the exact wording. I'm looking for it now. Do we want to move on to the next question in the meantime?
Yeah, let's do it.
Real quick, I do see we have...
I could just say...
Yeah, go ahead.
about it. I think a large part, maybe the majority of the public, are still more emotional than rational about it. Like, I would try to stay with my same rationale before October 7th. So I would have treated it the same before or after. But I think maybe even most people really start feeling less rationally and more emotionally.
Yeah, I would say, just to add to that point, I think for non-Israelis, probably one of the key things that you should know is just the absolute gravity of the hostage question for Israelis today. I feel like Israelis are simply unable to engage with all these type of things. We need our hostages back. And I think a large majority, I don't know the percentage of them, but it is very difficult to feel any form of compassion right now to anybody, unless, so long as they're still holding the hostages. I think that even those people that would support transfer, I don't know how stubborn that support is. I feel like when I've been speaking to people and pushing back on it, it withers away very quickly. I have not yet found it in even, I don't know, whatever numbers Dal will show, I haven't found that there is just like a very strong and hard support for that, even if people were to fill it in and bubble that in as an option.
I mean, I would even go on to say I don't even think it's unusual. I think it's quite normal to want your enemy to go someplace else. So it's all a question of, have you been radicalized to the point where you support ethnic cleansing or genocide? And I think all collectives have capacity to be pushed to that point, right? If you were to poll Palestinians, would you like to relocate all Jews living on the land? The majority would say yes. And now you might say, yeah, but they're much more oppressed. But this isn't a competition. It's simply to demonstrate that once there's enough fear, once there's enough pain, mistrust, and hate of another population, you would support getting rid of them by any means necessary. If you believe that it is us or them, you will people choose us. So I actually don't think it's unusual, the numbers we're seeing. But I do agree that those numbers would change very quickly. Once we have some quiet, once we start moving towards some kind of reconciliation process. But I don't think it's something unusual at all, honestly.
And there's also the argument that we have one country, they have 22 countries, which is basically that Palestinians would be safe abroad, but Jews would not be safe abroad.
Yeah, I hear people make that case, but I mean, I don't think Jews are less safe in New York or LA than they are in Israel. At least
but the Palestinians in New York or LA would be more safe than the Jews in New York or LA.
Yeah,
neither one is getting American visas, though.
Probably,
like,
yeah.
That's not really the option. Adal, should we move more quickly?
Yeah. Maybe I do want to though represent the more hardline position on here. Like this is the good time to express the Kahanist position, because the central part is relocation. Look, we need to care for ourselves more than anybody else. This is our land historically, biblically, and currently. We've tried to make it work. We keep dying in the process. We have a historic opportunity to relocate Gazans. Trump is allowing us to do it. Now's the time to act. I already see somebody saying clip this shit. Yeah. I know somebody's gonna use this shit against me. So I need to every sentence I need to remind I'm representing the Kahanist position. Anyways, yeah.
There's also like the two-tier citizenship position, like give them long-term residency, essentially in East Jerusalem, but no voting rights. Maybe local voting rights.
Well, right.
It's kind of that position.
Right. There's kind of it's almost like the spectrum for many on the right would be anywhere between let's say on the very extreme would be genocide to ethnic cleansing to apartheid. That's kind of the range of thought in some segments of society.
But Adar, I think I would probably tweak that Kahanist interpretation a little bit. It isn't just that I should care about my own more than I should care about the other. No, like I have so much respect for them that I understand they're never going to accept me here. Not in these borders and those borders. They're not going to accept me. We should wake up and understand their struggle. Their struggle is a real one. And given that real struggle, and given the fact that they'll never get rid of their idea of violent resistance, it's incompatible. My needs are incompatible with theirs. That's really it. And so I need to just understand it. I need to respect it. They have pride on their side. They believe that this is theirs. I believe that this is mine and that we can share. They don't believe we can share. So it is what it is.
Okay.
It's about winning. When you have two incompatible positions, it's up to you to win, essentially. Otherwise, losing means losing is not good. You have to win.
Yeah, but the thing that's interesting is I think Kahana did it, and I think Jabotinsky did it, and I think there's always like a little bit of like an attitude of respect and admiration for the other side, and it comes almost as like it comes bundled in this like package of genuine concern and understanding. I get them. I'm concerned about them. And it's good for them, but it is what it is. I think they always try to sell it like that.
I don't know. Yeah, that maybe
maybe
that's how they sell it, though. I don't know if they really feel that compassion. Yeah. I think maybe I think Mordechai, who's meant to join us, I think he would be in that camp. He has admiration for them, but he's like, look, it's us or them. It's us, you know. But yeah, Adam, you make a better Kahanist than me.
I mean, the whole Rav Kook, like Yehuda Cohen thing, that's totally that. He's very empathetic. I mean, he completely understands it's like the far left position, essentially,
right.
Which I have a lot of sympathies to, honestly. But I think it is genuine. I think they genuinely understand because they're closer in mindset to the Palestinians than the liberal leftists from Tel Aviv.
True.
And the liberal leftists from Tel Aviv are no different than globalist liberals in Europe. They have nothing in common with Palestinians. While it makes a lot more sense for people like Kahanist or Yehuda, Rav Kook types to empathize with Palestinians because they're so much closer in position. It's just the flip side of it.
And there's also the might is right argument. So we fought a war. They wanted to take the land by force. We wanted to take the land by force. We won, so it's rightfully ours because we won it in a war. So if that's what they wanted for themselves, then they should accept it in our case.
Yep, that's also very that's also not only is that a common position, it's also hard to argue against. It's like, look, why should I care about human rights? Why should I care about them? I care about me and my family. Like, okay, protest,
I
resist.
actually don't see this. I actually don't see the might is right argument in the Israeli narrative. I think it comes off as this, but there's always a little bit extra wrapping, and so it's always like we wanted to do this peacefully. We wanted to coexist. The UN gave us the land. And gave us legitimacy. They decided to launch a war, and now they lost. So now I took it in order to preserve my life, not because it's me and I'm better than others. They're trying to kill me. I'm trying to stay alive. I need to do what it takes to stay alive. It isn't just I managed to do it, so it is what it is. I just managed to do it. If I could take Syria, I'll take Syria. So it's not might is right in that sort of like moral imperative sense.
I think.
If tomorrow we could take Egypt, we took Egypt. It's great.
I think we're describing slightly different segments of society in the arguments that they make. But I agree. What you expressed is also very, very common. So another question. Abstract law. I like this one. And guys, if you see a question that you want to respond to, also feel free to bring it up. But abstract law says, do you understand why many believe they're committing genocide, or do they deny, justify, or they don't care? So maybe I'll start on this one because this is something that I've been thinking on quite a lot.
Is this on YouTube? I want to read it.
No, this is here on Discord. You'll see it in the comment section. I think, first of all, the word for genocide in Hebrew is retzach am, which is nation murder. So there's a debate over the term genocide in the West, whether it means an attempt to exterminate an entire population or a slightly broader definition, which is destroy a population in whole or in part, and then there's different criteria to meet the standard of genocide, right? In Israel, there's not a nuanced conversation of how is genocide defined. So Israelis, the way the word is defined is trying to exterminate the entire population. So in that sense, Israelis rightfully say, no, we're not trying to kill as many of them as possible. But the question of do they care, most Israelis, from my conversations with them, don't seem to care all too much about civilians on the other side. And this is represented in polling data as well. It was something, this was probably 6 months ago, but 70-something% of Israelis think Palestinian civilians should be considered not at all or to very little extent when operating in Gaza. So they don't consider it a genocide, but they also don't care for what happens to the well-being. Generally speaking, they don't care. What's interesting is the conversation that the pro-Israel activists online are having, the Hasbaristas, about trying to make it seem like this is the best fought war in history and the numbers are unlike which we've seen. That's a Hasbara argument that the pro-Israel camp is making to the world. That's not conversations that are had in Israeli society. That's not what they're talking about on news panels and stuff like that. It's we need to win. We need to win by any means necessary. Whoever
I
wants.
don't think I disagree. I think I disagree with that. I rarely hear let's just kill everybody. Really, in the news, you see like news anchors having the discourses there just flatten everywhere and murder millions of people. I never hear anything remotely close.
No.
Wait,
Adam.
Negligent.
Adam, they're not using that language, but they're having debates over the news if we should care if children are being killed or not. They're saying actual news anchors and politicians are saying there's no civilians in Gaza. That is a mainstream position that there's no civilians in Gaza. That if children are killed, okay, that's a future terrorist. That's not a consideration we need to take. This isn't a fringe position. They're not saying we need to kill as many as possible, but the no or little regard for civilians is a mainstream position.
The extent to which we should have regard is the discourse. I don't think the discourse is let's obliterate all of the children because one day they'll grow up to be terrorists.
Correct.
That's a position.
Correct.
That isn't where the discourse. That is a position. And if anything, probably the primary discourse is we need to go after Hamas. If children end up getting killed in the process, that's Hamas's responsibility. Right? It isn't. And you could say that that's criminal. You could say whatever you want, but I feel like that's different from saying not that you're saying it, but just so that people don't walk away with that feeling. I don't think that what I hear in the news is news anchors saying, let's kill all of the children in Gaza because one day they'll grow up.
No, for sure.
You'll hear every now and then some politician saying something like this, but I don't think that's the main line.
Right, but without a doubt, it's not the main line, but that is a represented position to a far higher degree than we are killing too many civilians. There's a humanitarian crisis that you rarely hear in discourse. That's fringe, but we don't need to take them into account. There's no civilians in Gaza is far more represented and far more mainstream than the humanist position by significant margins. One is not.
Yes.
Yeah. And in fact, it was.
You shouldn't take it into account when you go after, not in general, but when you go after specific Hamas operatives or when you try to rescue the hostages, then you don't take them into account. I think that's right. Like there has to be an end, and there's an objective here. The objective isn't the indiscriminate slaughter. The objective is the accomplishment of the war aims.
Yeah, I agree.
I think.
Noam, would you? Yeah.
Well, first, I think these statements like there are no civilians in Gaza, or that they shouldn't care about or killing a child is killing a future terrorist. That's not the way that I think most people take it. I think that they take it as if children gets killed, then it's their parents' fault and the government's fault, the government that their parents voted in, and the society that they created. So that I think that's more maybe the way more people rationalize it than killing a Gazan is killing a future, killing a Gazan child is killing a future terrorist. And other than that, I think I can just answer specifically the question from my personal point of view. To me, it's not that I understand or don't understand why many believe we are committing a genocide. I understand why many claim that they believe that we are committing a genocide, and they're doing it in bad faith to use as a tool against Israel, because I cannot see any objective definition of genocide where Gaza is a genocide and the 7th of October isn't. I think under every definition, the 7th of October would be a genocide before Gaza could be considered a genocide. So
I think you and I had a debate about this before.
Yeah, I think Noam, the one big difference is the scale. So scale is taken into consideration when determining if something's a genocide, not just intent. Scale matters. So that there's clearly a difference in scale.
And I don't think that scale is a good argument.
No, fair, but
I don't think scale should matter.
Yeah, you could argue that, but we can't. Wait, hold on one second. I lost. Hold on, I lost this on Discord.
Anyway,
wait, hold on.
I think the vast majority. Oh.
Yeah. Okay. All good. We can still hear you, and we have Mordon here. Welcome, Mordon. But we lost Grocery Man. Okay.
So, I think the vast majority of people on the anti-Israeli side or the pro-Palestinian side saying that Israel is committing a genocide is they're doing it using it as a tool against Israel. So also, I think Israelis won't take it seriously because they don't think that the people who are saying it are being objective.
Hi, everyone.
And I also personally think that most of the people saying that are not being objective.
I have a different note on that.
So
Mordon,
I just wanted to welcome you to the stage. So Mordon, it's great to have you here. Everybody before they went on kind of briefly said where they find themselves on the political spectrum. So do you want to start with that and then share your perspective here?
Of course. I'm Mordon, as you probably see. I'm 40 years old. I'm left-wing in Israel. I even find Meretz to be too nationalistic for me.
Do you identify? Do you still consider yourself a Zionist?
Yes, because I do believe a Jewish state should exist. What form? If it's in one form and another, but
okay, great.
Yes.
So to the left of Meretz, to the left,
necessary even.
Okay. I love the diversity here. Thanks, Mordon. We'd love to hear your perspective on this.
Sorry, one sec.
I think you wanted to comment on the genocide question, right?
Yeah. Floor is yours.
Maybe read it out again for Mordon because he might have not heard it.
Please.
So the question is, hold on, let's find it.
I see it. Do Israelis understand why many believe they're committing genocide, or do they deny, justify, or don't care? It's from Abstract Claw and...
Okay, sorry. Okay, so I think that's the wrong question, because what most Israelis believe doesn't matter. It's a centralized view of unity that is quite irrelevant to what's really happening on the field. In a way that we have extremists that are actually calling the shots. And for every good, beautiful, ponytailed paratrooper, we have several soldiers that are on the field doing atrocities with an actual intent to just kill Palestinians. We see it, they film it themselves, they do it themselves, they're happy about it. Just today I saw a video of soldiers just throwing away money they stole from someplace. We can say all day, argue whether it's a genocide or not, but that is not the question. The question is the intent about the destruction of the Palestinians, acceptance, agreement, all those kind of things. And the moment we have the people in leadership saying we wish to do settlements, we wish to destroy them, we wish to eliminate them, we wish to find, even if they say we need to find a humane way to remove them from our supposed territories, it's still ethnic cleansing, it's still a war crime, and it's a very Marxist view, but they do what they do, while the common Israelis are just like, are we the left or right? Let's argue between ourselves. And while they act freely. Thank you.
Thanks, Mordan. Noam, anyone else want to chime in on this?
I mean, we're not debating it, right?
No, it's fine to disagree. It's yeah. If you feel differently, you could share.
Okay, so I just feel that what Morton gave is too anecdotal. So it doesn't. That you said that you have soldiers that are intentionally trying to kill as many Palestinians, and they're happy about it, or destroy Palestinians. I think it's too anecdotal. You said just today I saw something. So
let me rephrase. Allow me to rephrase myself then. We have the religious Zionism, which is the actual problem in Israel. They are the ones orchestrating any hostile, horrible action against the Palestinians. And they are influencing everyone else, because in Israel, the military is a religion. And in this way, a soldier cannot do wrong, according to the Israeli eyes. And even if he does, it's a mistake. It didn't really mean it, or they're just a few very, very bad apples. And those people are influencing like the entire system. It's like a disease in a way, if you want more to consider me an extremist. But the influence on the occupation and the things that are happening on the West Bank and Gaza is seen through their eyes. I can give a few examples but you say it's too anecdotal. But when Weiss, I forgot her first name, that the leader of the settlers is escorted by soldiers to see where they will build future settlements in Gaza, and no one does anything about it, then the future plans are in place.
Yeah. Is somebody saying something?
No.
More than I want to, I guess, echo what Noam was saying. I also don't. My experience of Israelis and of Israeli soldiers that are in Gaza today, that have been in Gaza since the beginning of the war, I don't get that impression. A bloodthirst desire to exterminate, annihilate, displace. That has not been my experience of them. I think there's in the beginning at least, there was a vengeful desire to get back at Hamas, but that they had made pretty clear distinctions between Hamas and the general population. And you could say that they fail at doing it. You could say that I have the sample size is very small, but I'm probably talking about, I don't know, at least a couple of dozen people that I know that are just been in Gaza and telling me about their experience and the experience of all of their comrades. I'm not sure how to reconcile this with what you're saying.
So
I also watched videos and that seem to be suggesting what you're saying, but I'm not going there 100% with you yet because I don't know how to reconcile it with my experience.
I
But
think,
it's not. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. Let me try to reconcile it. So, Adam, imagine a situation, and this is not a polling question we have, but it's not an insignificant number of the population. Imagine if something like 15 to 20% of the Israeli population say there's no innocence in Gaza. And I don't think that's an exaggeration, 15 to 20%. I think it actually could be more. Maybe it's a little bit less, but I think that's within range. So you have some segment, a not insignificant segment of the soldiers in Gaza believe that there's no civilians. They also recognize that you take less risk if you just shoot anyone on sight. And because the most revered institution in Israel is the IDF, there's societal and political backlash for holding soldiers accountable. So you have a great lack of internal regulation. So it doesn't require a majority. It requires a loud minority of bad actors that can't be held accountable to be committing an abundance of war crimes. And I think that is almost certainly, that's almost certainly what's happening right now.
Yeah, I can understand that. But I think that was different from what Morten was saying. I think I could sign off on that. Morten, would you? Yeah.
People don't I have friends in Givati and paratroopers, and they're good people, and I'm absolutely sure they will not do war crimes. However, for every paratrooper like that, there is a Netzach Yehuda, and there's people in the military uniform settlers acting soldiers. And they are the ones, many of them are the ones creating these atrocities. You don't see them. The secular, regular soldiers, supposedly, don't see those soldiers on the field. And they're like, what are you talking about? My unit is good. All units are good.
So you're saying more than 50%? You think more than 50% of the
doesn't matter if
soldiers
it's,
are like that?
how many soldiers are the Netzach Yehuda? How many soldiers are the Zionist, national Zionists? How many soldiers, religious Zionists? How many soldiers are vengeful? It could be 10%, it could be 20%, but people with artillery can do a lot of damage, whether they are a vast majority or minority.
Shooting artillery is not up to one soldier. I can say that as an artillery person.
Well, for sure,
even with commanders.
Wait, but we know that
sniper rifles, okay, or RPGs, yes, but not artillery.
So,
I'll give a more specific example. You can the rape in Sdeti Iman. I go to Reddit and people are like, yeah, Israelis are defending rape. They love the rape. But it's not that the rape, specifically the rape. It's a soldier from Force 100. He cannot do wrong.
Right.
If he did it, probably the Palestinian deserved it. And that's a mentality that's so dangerous.
Yeah, I don't know how many people really think that. That sounds like someone something a Hamas supporter would say.
Yeah, I mean, no, they might say it'd be right, just because they say that it's not necessarily wrong, but it's also true that they believe there are internal mechanisms for holding soldiers accountable. And you could say that they're delusional about it, but they take great pride in thinking that that's the case. I'm not saying that to you, no, I'm saying that to Morten. Right? So I don't think that they think if a soldier did it, it must be good. if a soldier did it and got away with it, it was probably good. It probably would have been investigated otherwise. I think that's how a lot of them treat it. But that distinction between maybe it's just 10% bad apples that then do a lot of damage. I think that is a nuance that is worth calling out, because people in the audience who might not be Israelis, who have never come into contact with Israeli soldiers, could walk away with a very different interpretation. Could be that the results on the ground are very different, but the way we get there, I think, is I think it's good that we're making those distinctions.
Shall we move on to?
We want to.
Yeah. I think we'll do more of we'll do more of a speed round where just because we want to get to as many questions as possible. So we'll stop the back and forth, and we'll kind of just each take 30 seconds to a minute to answer different questions. And if you don't need to respond if you don't feel like you're adding something new. So we'll run through them. Do any Israelis, this is from Shane, do any Israelis recognize that the actions that led to the creation of Israel destroyed a whole other society? What percentage of them do? Any remorse? If not, how do you think the Palestinians came to be there?
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I'm sorry to interrupt. Just a comment about something I said before. When I said that's something a Hamas person would say, then I meant that a Hamas supporter would say that if a woman was raped on October 7th, then she deserved it. Not that more than it's anyway as Hamas supporter, just to be clear.
So so a question like this, I think maybe questions like what Shane asked, I think there's pretty standard answers that I'll run through. And if anybody disagrees, then you could just share a counter position. So most Israelis don't really have much sympathy for Palestinians and the Nakba. They believe that they weren't really a unified people. They were just different Arab clans living here, and that you started a war. You got an opportunity to have half the land. You rejected it. You started a war against us. Oh well, that's not my problem. That's generally speaking the narrative around the questions you asked. Does anybody feel differently?
Yes, of course.
No, feel differently, not in sense that he's asking how do Israelis feel about this, not how do you feel about this. So in this regard, I'm just trying to explain how Israeli society generally think about the Nakba and all that. It's look, you were never your own country. You were Arab clans. You only wanted a state after we arrived here. You got offered a state, you rejected it. You attacked us violently, and we won. It's ours. I'd say that's pretty standard. Right? Yeah.
I'll add maybe one more thing. I think there's a little bit of like confusion among a lot of Israelis about what exactly happened when. When they think about the Nakba, they think about the 1948 war. They think about Arab states invading. They don't think about all of the time preceding the Arab invasion. They don't think about that civil war era under the British mandate. And so I think it's kind of confusing for them. For the Palestinians, I think they tend to start the war on the partition plan. So like in 47, while Israelis tend to start the war in their mind in 48, right? Like with the invasion of the Arabs.
I think I think Palestinians started earlier. I think for them it's the 20s, the teens, late 1800s. Like for them it's when Zionism started.
I mean, Israelis too, but yeah, for sure, for Israelis too. I just mean like with respect to the war and to the Nakba.
Okay, I hear that.
There's a lot of ignorance, a lot of misinformation about what happened. People think that the Etzel has museums and are seen as heroic, but just open a Wikipedia page in English, you'll see a list of such a long list of terrorist attacks against civilians, not against British soldiers.
Cool. Anyone else want to chime in, or shall we continue? Cool. Let's continue. Yeah. At this speed, we could run through them. We have a super chat on YouTube from Floodland99 asking, "Are we okay with IAEA inspecting Israel?" That's the nuclear energy. I don't know what it stands for, but they're the ones who like deal with inspecting nuclear energy facilities or nuclear weapons facilities. So I'm super okay with it. I think it's weird that Israel's the only nuclear power that has not acknowledged it and does not have IAEA inspectors. So yeah, we should be part of the rest of the world in regards to that. Anyone feel differently? What would
I
most?
don't know enough about the scope and the purview of it.
I'm trying to think, like, not just on this panel, but how would Israelis feel about that? I don't know. Like, I think most Israelis would probably be okay with it. I don't see the harm in letting them inspect. Most Israelis would not be willing to give up their nuclear weapons, but if it's just inspecting, I don't think there'd be much objection to that.
I disagree.
No, but isn't the point of the inspection is to verify whether there is, and then that would be a violation of non-proliferation? Isn't that the idea?
Maybe. So more than
what would they expect? What would they expecting? Suddenly they find out there's like 15,000 nuclear bombs. They'll say, "Oh, you got 15,000 nuclear bombs." People, look what happened to Vanunu, if you remember that guy. He just said that Israel has nuclear weapons. He's in prison. Well, he's not right now, but he went to prison for a long time. It's still considered taboo to talk about Israeli nuclear capabilities.
So your impression is most Israelis would want it to remain a secret?
Israelis are fearing foreign influence, especially now.
Okay,
I think it's hard to argue. It's hard to argue against the idea of inspection, but if we're looking at it subjectively, what consequences it might have, then it might be a good idea not to allow inspection.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Next, Nicky S. Is Nicky S still here? No.
Yeah, he's here.
All right, Nicky is here. Also, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but Simfo, aren't you Israeli as well? If you are, you're welcome to raise your hand and we'll bring you on. It's Israeli panel, so you're welcome to join.
Shalom.
Shalom. Okay, Nicky S says, could any of you envision a counterfactual history where a Jewish state was formed in Palestine without displacing Palestinians or preventing a Palestinian state? Anyone want to chime in on this?
I think, if I understand it correctly, let's say in the partition plan, Jews that lived in the area that was dedicated to the Arab state would have been okay staying there as a minority under the Arab states. Then yes, there are people who think that, and I might have been one of them. That would have been okay with staying as a minority in the Arab state, if that's what the question was.
Yeah, I think I would unpack the question because you could parse it in two different ways, Nikias, if you want to specify. So it's like, could you envision a counterfactual history where a Jewish state was formed? Do you mean was formed in the sense that the Jews would be willing to form such a Jewish state that doesn't require displacing Palestinians? Or one where Palestinians themselves would be okay with it, and where the Palestinians themselves wouldn't then act in the kind of way that would then lead to their displacement. So I can't comment on how the Palestinians would react to it, but I can easily imagine, I think most Zionist, thinkers and statesmen up until the late 30s, that's what they envisioned. That type of history. I don't think they envisioned a mass displacement. I think even up until the war itself, they were shocked that the Palestinians left.
I think the question itself is irrelevant. We can play on what if the Nazi Germany won the war and so on. But like what could have been done differently in the 40s? It's a fun thinking exercise, but like we need to see the things that are done today.
I'm for fun exercises. Some people, it's important.
Yeah. Well, he's thinking 20s, 30s. Yeah, I think 20s, 30s, 100%. Late 30s, I think it starts to turn. 20s, 30s, yeah, I could easily imagine a situation where that had happened. I think that was the main motivation of the Zionists.
Simfo, you want to chime in, but also just confirm you're Israeli, right?
Yeah, no, I think
Cool.
I think that pretty much covers it in that, like, if it was in the cards, then the Yeshuv would have very much been on board with it. Obviously, we could haggle over the details of it, but if it was in the cards, then from the perspective, it would have happened. That's certainly my my understanding of the history and also my position.
So just to sum this up, or at least share my perspective on it, I think it's trying to build a national homeland on a piece of land that is inhabited by another population is very hard to achieve without that population responding violently. But I think had the early Zionists appealed to the Palestinians saying, let's build the homeland together. We're long lost Levantine brothers. We have resources from the West. We'll get international support. Let's do this together. I think that potentially could have worked without violence. But I also want to just acknowledge that the early Zionists were like deeply traumatized people, and I'm sharing this from like a more progressive point of view. Without that level of trauma, it's easy for me to see, yeah, come in and make friends with everybody and build together. But I don't even know if that's a realistic expectation of the early Zionists. It was a radical idealist movement, and they came in swinging, essentially. There wasn't a consideration for the local population. It's like, we have an opportunity. We are going to take this. And now it wasn't a monolith. There was a wide diversity of different Zionist opinions. Some wanted to do it a little bit more with cooperation. Others wanted it to be more exclusive. As things started to heat up, the radicals won. That's kind of been the pattern, that violence kind of lends credence to the radicals' argument that you need strength, you need force, and that's kind of been I think a cycle we've been stuck in for quite some time now.
I don't think that was like narrative. I think that was reality. It was the case that coexistence in under one governmental structure was not an option.
Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is something, maybe you and I spoke about this very briefly. I'm reading a book right now, and it'd be nice to do a room on this at some point. It's about whether or not the early Zionists actually believed even in the concept of a nation state. And the argument of the book is that they didn't even believe in a nation state. They believed in self-determination, in a national self-determination, but not in a nation state. And the way that we are now looking at Zionist historiography is through the lens of a nation state that ended up being born. And we're sort of connecting the dots backwards, as if that's what they had intended this entire time. Their argument is that it's totally different. If anything, what they were going for is something much more multi-ethnic, with like collective recognition. It is not a displacement. It's not exclusionary. It's not exclusive. It's not none of those things, because they didn't even see examples of that in Europe in the 19th century. The examples that they had is much more like the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
What year are you talking about? Like what time frame?
Even after Weizmann, and definitely even including the early Ben-Gurion.
But there was all these. First of all, there was like a general patronizing attitude towards the Arabs living on the land. But there was also not. They were putting pressure on Jewish farmers to not hire non-Jews. Land was being bought from Ottoman landowners. Palestinians were being displaced, and then no one would live there for years. It would just be roped off, waiting for Jews. So that to me is not a cooperative effort. There was, from very early on, an exclusionary.
It's not cooperative.
There was an exclusionary element from very early on. But I would imagine maybe you're describing some segment of Zionism, but I don't think that was the prominent brand of Zionism.
even including Herzl, Pinsker, and all the way to Weizmann and Ben-Gurion. That's the claim. But it doesn't mean you don't privilege in the project, your national self-determination project on the land, which might require, yes, that you hire Hebrew labor. They call it, sure. But it's not about creating the kind of society that is displacing en masse and that therefore is inevitably going to lead to violence. In their mind, that isn't the case, right? I think it ended up happening this way, right? But can I envision, I think the question that Nikias is asking, could you envision? Yes, I think that's what they envisioned. Now, they didn't think about it, I think, in too fine a detail. I think they kept things very kind of like, rough and high level. And then at some point, violence just made the choices absolutely crystal clear.
May I interject?
Yeah, real quick. Are you Israeli QWQ? I don't think we've seen you here before.
I am Israeli.
Yalla, ten barosh.
How does this view account for the talks of transfer which are present in Herzl's writings?
Yeah, I think that it's what, like one line in an ocean of thousands and thousands of pages, right? And even that line is a bit cryptic and not entirely clear what is meant. Is it meant in the context of South Americans? And of course, that is one possibility, but it's by and large not the principal contours of the body of his work.
That's true.
Also, I don't think the context of it was coercive. You could say the context of it was dismissive, or something along the lines of, "Oh, some of the less well-off Palestinians, maybe we could just buy them off and get rid of them that way." It was dismissive, but it wasn't coercive.
Yeah, and isn't Altneuland, his novel, explicitly? Isn't it explicitly multi-ethnic and utopian?
I haven't read it, but my understanding is that the story itself is about a Palestinian in his version of Israel being somehow discriminated against, and then there's a whole rising up of the people to defend their society, which is open and equal. And I think it was very idealistic and pluralistic, as far as I'm aware. But I haven't read it myself.
Great. Shall we move on to the next one?
Now, people want you to argue against the point that I made. The pro-Palestinian narrative. You scroll all the way to the bottom.
Which one specifically?
Wait, someone was saying.
Which point?
No,
I wanted to comment on what Adar said in the beginning, so I could just now or later.
Yeah.
So, Adar, you said that it mostly wasn't for coexisting, or it was more exclusive.
Well, if
less inclusive.
Yeah, even a lot of the early diaries that have been read from British officers, from early Zionists, from Palestinian writers, they describe this general patronizing nature that the early Zionists have. They weren't coming and treating them with dignity and respect. And this is a culture that really, one of the biggest misconceptions in Israeli society is Palestinians or Arabs, they only understand the language of force. But more than anything, they understand the language of honor and dignity. And we came as colonizers like that. We were indistinguishable, just how we showed up and how we treated them. And there was pressure to not hire them for any work. Even Jews living on the land for a long time. This is from a journal entry. You see, he's saying how these Arabs are his friends and they've been working for him for years, and now he's being bullied into firing them and coerced, right? Or how the land was bought and Arabs weren't allowed to live on it. And I think one of the early Zionists and I guess he wasn't one of the earliest Zionists, but who had the best understanding of the dynamic was Jabotinsky. You know, his essay, Iron Wall, very clearly, like, he's like, yeah, of course they're gonna respond to us as colonizers. That's what we are to them, and we're just gonna need to build an iron wall. I think he had a very realistic, as much as I disagree with like his hawkish approach, I think he had a very clear understanding of who they are and how they function. Similar to what Adam said earlier, like often you feel like settlers often understand Palestinians better than lefties. Like they're more similar to them. They recognize them and they see them for who they are. So I think Jabotinsky was similar in that regard. But by and large, it wasn't this attempt to build some kind of cohesive society with the native populations. There's an opportunity to have some kind of a Jewish homeland. We need to, look out for one another. We need to support one another, give each other jobs, give each other the land. And this came at the expense of the Palestinians living here. So I think that's,
I think that there was at least a somewhat significant number of Zionist settlers who did want to build something that is shared with the local Arab population. And coincidentally, earlier today, I sent you and Adam a group message with the video about transcribing it. And it's exactly about one of those kinds of people. So I don't know, I could summarize what he says, but maybe it's just for later.
Yeah, if it's relevant now, sure. If you want to summarize it, yeah.
I mean, it's a video of you heard the name Dov Yirmiyah?
Tov Yirmiyah. No.
Dov.
Oh, Dov. No.
He was born in 1914, in the Ottoman time, and in I'm not sure, somewhere in the Galilee, and then when the British took over, he moved to Naalal. He grew up there. He said he grew up with with good relations with the surrounding Arab, Bedouin population, specifically Bedouin. And then he later joined the Haganah, which at that time, because of the pogroms in the 20s, it formed as a kind of local self-defense force. Because before that, the Jewish settlers would get basically like higher Arab protection rackets from the cities to protect their villages. And then the Haganah was supposed to be a Jewish replacement for that. So that already started some hostilities with the urban Arabs, but they had good relations with the Bedouins. But then the ones that were displaced by the National Trust buying lands were usually the Bedouins, but they were relatively small in number, at least in that area. And they just moved on because they would use pasture. They weren't traditional farmers. They lived off pasture, like goats and sheep. And then he talks about, he was responsible for conquering the Western Galilee. So from Nahariya, which is north of Akko, all the way to Nazareth. And he said that he basically had to fight the urban Arab population, which didn't put up much of a fight and usually fled, and that they were supposed to be assisted by the Kaukjis, the Arab Salvation Army, something like this, that was sent to conquer the Galilee. And they didn't. And after the war, he was living, I think, in Naalal, and he said that 50% of the community wanted to stay as a minority in the Arab states because that's where they grew up with, and they got along with their Bedouin neighbors at the very least. And the other half wanted to transfer to the Jewish state. but then the war ended up changing all that. So that's, I don't know, a bit of a small summary. So I think it was, and he was from the Shomer HaTzair also.
Interesting.
So at least the Shomer HaTzair or the Mapam people wanted to, or at least in the Galilee, wanted to have some kind of shared community.
But no, this is already a little. I think that's a little. It's much later than what right? Like you're talking about just the Zionist enterprise.
Yeah, I'm talking from the
1920s.
Even prior,
so,
even prior, yeah.
So his parents moved with the second Aliyah, and that's what they were going for in the 1910s or something like that. So it wasn't, I don't think it was insignificant. That's basically what I was trying to say.
It is an interesting question. What percentage of early Zionists would need to be exclusionary and patronizing for that to paint the entire movement as such, right? You would think that even if it's the minority, and I'm not convinced it is, but even if it's the minority, that would be enough to create conditions for violence, right? Like the 20s, Adam, you mentioned the 20s. The 20s, it already hit a boiling point. The violence already occurred. We're talking like there were decades of tension building up before violence.
But I don't think that tension was political, to be honest. I think for the most part, it was very local. It definitely was. And oftentimes it was just misunderstood. Sometimes it's just bands of Bedouins that are harassing some yeshuv. And the Jews think that it has like a national religious character. And they're just marauding whatever. They just happen to be, it would have happened to Arab villages too. Sometimes the Jews perceived it to be, oh, these are like the czarist, like anti-Semitic pogroms yet again, and it's just some criminals. And I think so. A lot of it is just like layers of misunderstanding. I think it was probably more just clashes of values and cultures, more so than anything ethnic. I think it took a while for it to take on like an ethnic or religious or national form, but even in, I don't know, when I'm thinking about like in the about Hebrew labor, the point of Hebrew labor isn't that, or they were dismissive of Arabs. It wasn't that. It's that unless you manage to employ Jews, they're all going back to Russia. That's what happened. Like in the first Aliyah was what? A disaster. All the Jews came and then they're like, oh shit, we're starving here. And then they went back to Russia. Because they couldn't make it work. So at some point, I was like, okay, if you wanted to make it work, you need to do very specific things. Like you have to hire Jews. The Jews couldn't compete with the Arabs, right? The Jews, they come from Eastern Europe, Western Europe, whatever, with like various expectations of how to, what do they say? Like at the time, the Arabs lived on very little. You know, there's some bread, some olives. You can't compete like this. The Jews needed to come up with totally different ways, even just to survive.
What were they eating in Eastern Europe? Gefilte fish? Like, is that better?
I think the quote from Benny Morris is like, they were used to operas and they used to go to the symphony and they
interesting.
And now they came and they're
but like, is that your impression of that? That's the Zionists that came, ones who were going to the symphonies. My impression is that it was more of a peasant, more of like a peasant class.
I think it was I think the peasant might have come a little later. I think it might have just been like idealistic youth.
There's a separation to be made between the first Aliyah and the second and onwards, and also there's a separation to be made between the Zionist thinkers and like the movers, which were elites, and the rest, which were refugees. They had different motivations, different needs, and different expectations.
I know at least. I think the Shomer HaTzair people from Europe, they trained as like pioneering youth that they literally trained in Europe how to work the land with their own hands. And I think in some of the settlements, they weren't allowed to hire, let's say, Arab workers or other workers. They were only allowed to, the family had to work the land that was allotted to them by the members of the family themselves personally. So it's like a very big spectrum of maybe different types of immigrants.
Yeah, that makes sense. The more I think about it, and it'd be interesting to do a deeper dive into this. Maybe we even try to get somebody like Benny Morris on. Maybe we should try to get a debate between like Morris and Pape. I feel like that'd be an interesting one. But
I don't know if Morris would go on a platform with Pape.
Yeah,
I doubt it.
So maybe we find somebody who has just a counterbalance to Morris. That'd be interesting. But the more I think about it, it wouldn't even need to be the majority of Zionists who are exclusionary for that to have a significant impact on how local Arab populations would feel about Zionism. It's similar to a dynamic we see today. It only requires a minority to be violent for that to disrupt an entire peace process. So you could have a similar dynamic back then. I don't know that that was the case, but it very well may be. So I say we try to bring someone on and go deeper on this. You guys cool moving on to the next question? So this is two questions. Something Al asked. Al's not here anymore. Damn. And something Georgie asked, who's still here. Cool. Al asked, what's about this like greater Israel theory? And Georgie asked, what are the borders? When do Israelis want to stop expanding? So I think it'd be cool to ask everybody here individually what they think the borders of the land should look like. And this could be expanded to what solution would you like to see to the conflict? Whoever's ready can just take it.
Could I start?
Yep, go for it.
I think, first of all, there's no direct equivalent of the term Great Israel in Hebrew. I think it's a conflation of different terms that are used not interchangeably in the Hebrew Bible or the Torah. I think one of them is the Promised Land, and one of them is the complete land of Israel. And I think there are at least three different definitions of what that should be. So there's one from the Mediterranean to the Tigris and Euphrates or something like that. And then there's one from basically the land of Canaan, so between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River, and also not as south as the Negev and Eilat. And I think like at least the map that has become popular now to show, and I think even Ben-Gvir and Smotrich showed it, it's just a modern map based on the British and French border divisions. So it has nothing to do with the Jewish concept of whatever greater Israel might be referring to. So I think now, like Israeli politicians who use it are doing it out of spite to annoy the Palestinians or the international community, because it doesn't make sense that a religious Jewish person would use European border markings to define their promised land.
Thank you. So Mordechai, you've been invited on, so you just need to accept the request and you should be brought on. And Adam, I know you need to leave. Adam's leaving, Mordechai's coming on. So the ideological average here has remained exactly the same. And we shouldn't expect any shift in perspectives. But Adam, before you hop off, do you want to answer this question?
No, it's a tough one for me. I'm not sure I've thought enough about borders. I think to answer your question about like what is a stable solution, nevertheless, I think I see it as a function of the trust between the people, and as the level of trust changes, I think a practicable and stable solution changes. And so we can't expect a one-state one-state solution given a certain level of trust, and you can't expect two given a different level of trust. So I just think that we need to just keep our eyes on the actual goal. The goal isn't a state. The goal is safety and freedom and prosperity and yeah, and that could just like take lots of different manifestations.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. Thanks for joining us.
Adar, you hear me?
See everybody.
Yeah, we hear you.
All right, perfect. I'm here.
Okay, cool.
I'm your
So
service, guys.
cool. So just to catch you up, we're going around and people are responding to what solution they would like to see to the conflict and what they consider to be the borders of Israel, or their ideal borders of Israel. So let's just see if, just because I think others are waiting to speak, Quick or Simfo, do you guys want to chime in on this?
Yes. I want to add in a word. To answer this question, I think that we need to identify the mode of speech by which we're actually answering this question. One mode of speech would be a religious one. It would be in terms of ideals. It would be a mode of, how can I put this, of that which is granted to us by God or by a tradition. It is not rational in the same way. It is not given to critique and to change in the same way. If we are to participate in that mode of speech, then I think that we're already stuck. That's a dead end to me. Not to knock religion, not to knock religious traditions or a religious mode of speech. I think those are important and I think they have their place. But in terms of the discussion that we're having right now, it is difficult to continue that way.
Awesome.
Another would be a more philosophical mode of speech, in which we all have our own positions, our own values in this, our own ways that we want to take this, and through rational deliberation, we could achieve some middle point, even if that middle point is not in practice, but is rather an intellectual exercise, then surely that is better than being stuck in a way that we can't move on from. So as somebody with my values, and my values are not the values of a state, are not the values which serve a state. They're not fascist values. If we define and think of fascist as is traditional, that is, we are to the state, we are to serve the state, and we're only parts of one organic body, which is the state. All that we do is in power is to serve the state. I'm not a fascist. I believe that many Israelis are. I think that's very unfortunate. But I am not a fascist. I don't believe that most people here are fascists. So that already eliminates a massive amount of discourse that we could have, which would lead nowhere. So we're already doing pretty well here.
Thanks, Quick.
I haven't finished. If you want me to stop, then surely.
I want to get to a few more questions, so maybe take 30 more seconds to wrap up the point. Then we'll give it to Simfo, and then we're going to give it over to Mordechai.
Yes, the point is this answer is predicated on our values and our ability to correspond with one another and change together. If we are in a certain mode, like a religious mode or a fascist mode, there isn't much that we can do. But if we believe in values like universal emancipation, if we believe in values which are traditionally of the left, then we can get places, then we can answer these questions more successfully. We don't have to bring ourselves down to our knees and in worship of a state, if that makes sense.
Makes sense to me. Thank you, Quick. Simfa, all you.
The question was borders, right?
Yeah, what would you like to see the
And
borders
what was the second part?
and just solution in general? What solution you'd like to see to the conflict?
Oh, okay. Borders in general. Borders in general are as they are right now, with plus whatever two-state territory we will agree to swap for as part of a two-state solution. Other than that, the rest of it is Israel. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. And Mordechai. Oh yeah. Were you finished?
Yeah, I was gonna respond to the other half of that, just largely what I think should happen. Largely, what I think should happen would be after Hamas is removed and whenever whatever status quo is instated into Gaza, there should be a two-state negotiation that is generally along the lines of where we were at Taba. I'm sure there's going to be some changes because history hasn't been standing still for 20 years, but something that is along those lines.
Awesome, thank you. And Mordechai, because you're just joining now, maybe just give a few sentences about who you are to give people context.
Okay, I'm Mordechai.
Wait, your audio is not coming in for me. Is that just for me? Can others hear him?
No,
I can't hear him.
Yeah, Mordechai, we can't hear you at all.
I mean, here's Mordechai.
It's that
That's it.
it's that Palestine Wi-Fi. That's what it is. Mordechai.
I mean, it's cool. What about now?
Yeah. Now we hear you. Now we hear you. Yeah.
So, my name is Mordechai. Sorry I came late. Had a long day. What can I say? I'm what you guys would call a settler. I live in the West Bank, in Judea specifically. And I think you might have seen my debates in the past, or in Sucha. So it's like a 4-hour debate somewhere on the internet between the two of us.
Yeah, if you type in
probably can
if you search Adar debates a settler, you'll find Mordechai and I from a few years ago having one, and there's actually going to be another discussion between us uploaded tomorrow. So stay tuned.
In political stuff, Israel-Palestine debate. But I've chosen other things. I'm more involved now in rabbinics. I'm not so much into this, but from time to time, Adar tempts me. So that's why I'm here now. And the question, I'm not so interesting, but my ideas sometimes can be. The question was what I see as the borders of Israel and what solution do I see to the conflict. Is that correct?
Yep.
So my answer to that is that the borders of the country is the ideal border. I think my ideal borders should include what was historically Israel, was historically Judea. And that's not the clearest thing because Judea had different historical periods, but basically Jerusalem, the coastline, maybe, of course, Judea and Samaria, I'm not one of these greater Israel guys. I don't have this idea of having Euphrates to the Nile. That's never been something I thought of as a practical aspiration. But I do think that Israel without Jerusalem, Israel without Samaria, or without Judea is kind of meaningless. It's not really Israel that we prayed for, that we maintained our claim to. I believe that the claim to the land includes all these areas. Now, I would be, if I believe that there was a partner, an Arab partner for peace, in the sense that we can settle the conflict between us and the Arab world in a final and complete way by giving up some of our historic homeland, it would be extremely painful to me. But I believe that I would be I would agree to that. And I'm not even the issue. I personally would be it would be too difficult maybe for me to vote for such a policy, because I'm, maybe I'm not really that extreme, but let's assume I wouldn't. I think Israelis as a whole, like during the Oslo years, if they were convinced, they were persuaded that they could actually end the conflict and live safely in a Jewish state and not have to then defend the Jewishness of whatever's left of the state and constantly be gaslit and constantly be attacked for wanting to have our little ethnic protectorate in our historic homeland, I think we collectively as Israelis, as Jews, Israeli Jews, would have accepted a deal a long time ago, and I think we would in the future as well. I think what happened was that we were persuaded by events, by Intifada, by various wars and various things that the Palestinians themselves say, that if we gave them what we believe is rightfully ours, and we did it in good faith, we were persuaded that it wouldn't be in our favor, that we'd be in a conflict again. So we wouldn't even end the conflict. We would just give up historic and strategic land depth in exchange for basically nothing, in exchange for a promise that no one intends to keep. That's the opinion that I have. And that's, I think, kind of why you would see this rightward shift in Israeli politics. It's because of the fear. And being motivated by fear is not the greatest thing in the world. But that's the reality. And basically, that leaves me with the answer that ideally, I would be willing to negotiate, like most Israelis, land for peace. But I have to believe that the conflict would be settled. I'm not willing to go for a one-state solution. I'm not willing to give up on the idea of having a uniquely Jewish state. If you think that's fascist, I'm sorry. We're in the Middle East, and I think that we've seen over the last 100 years that small religious ethnic minorities in the Middle East don't really do well in larger states that they don't, control their own destiny. And I believe that we should learn from our neighbors and from the neighborhood and not be deluded. So I wouldn't give up on the uniqueness of the Jewish state. It doesn't have to be a democracy. It could be a democracy for Jews, because the purpose of Israel is not to be a tiny example of Western democracy. Its purpose of Israel, to me, is to be a protectorate for the Jewish people. Ethnic protectorate, that's fine. Like a reservation, if you will. And the solution to the conflict, I think, is basically what I just said as well, that our neighbors have to accept that we're here. If they don't accept that we're here, then no solution will help. And it has to be a real acceptance. It can't be this idea, oh yeah, we'll never accept your legitimacy. We're going to treat you as a colonial entity, and we're going to make a deal with you now, which we're going to in the future when we're stronger, which we're going to violate. Like that kind of thinking can't be part of a solution, and that's kind of why on both sides, like this kind of thinking on both sides means there'll never be a solution, and I'm kind of okay with that because I was born into this conflict and I'm probably going to die into it. And I don't have to have a solution if I don't have a partner. If you want to date someone and she's not interested in you, there's no solution. You're just not going to be with her, right? If you want to make peace with your neighbors, ideally it would be nice. But for me to make peace with my neighbors, it has to be in the terms of like certain minimum terms. which include them accepting that we're an integral part of the Middle East and that we belong here. This language that we don't, and I don't appreciate when Jews use it towards Palestinians either. But I'm not going to say that this is not an argument that's used on both sides. It is. But from my perspective, when I hear that I'm not indigenous to this land, even though I was born here and even though my roots are here, and that me as a Jew, I don't have the right to self-determination here. That idea in of itself makes me think that there might not be a solution right now other than us continuing to remain qualitatively and militarily superior to our neighbors. And then one day when the conflict dries up because people get smarter, or the conflict dries up because our enemies just pile up dead at our borders, then whoever's left will be willing to make peace with us. But right now, that's not the case. So I don't really have a solution other than survival of the fittest.
Thank you, Mordechai. So also to answer this question, the way I look at solutions is more so what are the rights of the people that need to be protected? And generally, I think we all have similar rights that need to be protected, but I think we have different desires that need to be met in order for a just solution to be found. So for Jews, our primary need is security. We want to be able to know that we can live here on this land and be secure. For Palestinians, it's a sense of justice and also, I would say, freedom on their land. Now, that doesn't mean that we Jews don't want freedom or justice, but we feel free, we feel justice. We're scared of losing our security. So the way I look at it is what solution can achieve that? And I think there's many ways to achieve that. It's all a question of what are the institutions that rule us. And I think that one way to achieve that is through two states, though I think it does come with increasing number of challenges. One of them being the number of settlers currently living in the West Bank. I don't think uprooting them from their homes is feasible, nor is it just. And I also think the majority of both populations have a desire to have access to all of the land. So while I could get behind a two-state solution, I see many challenges with it. I think if we do a two-state solution, we should aim to have it be a confederation, similar to the European Union. So you would have freedom of movement and strong cooperation between both countries. Now, granted, this would require a level of security and trust in order to make this work. Another way to make this work is a federation, where you split the land into many smaller cantons or states, kind of like you have in the United States or Switzerland. And this gives local populations more local autonomy. And then when it comes to governance, you have a system of checks and balances that doesn't allow one population to dominate the other population. Perhaps it's a parliament that is by default 50-50 Jewish, Palestinian. The reason I don't have much optimism about this is this requires a full reformation of the entire system. But it does solve some problems that are not solved with the Confederation. So I consider myself pretty solution agnostic as long as it is protecting the rights of the people. If there's a solution proposed that protects the right of the people and is just enough and is feasible, I could get behind it. Next question. This is taking in a slightly different direction. I think this will be the last question, and then what we're going to do is we're going to move this over into the chill room for whoever wants to continue, and then it's just a free-flowing conversation for everybody here. But what is something you love about Israel, and what is something you hate about Israel? Who wants to go first?
Maybe it's a deal. Okay.
Anyone want to run with this one?
I can start.
Go for it, Noam.
Oh.
If you want to go ahead.
So what I love, I love my family. I don't know if it counts. I love some of the food that you can't get anywhere else. And I like some of the places when it comes to like view and surroundings, like the Galilee. And what I hate probably the most is the lack of public transportation.
On Shabbat?
In general, even not just on Shabbat, but even in general.
What I hate most is difficult to decide, because there are several things which are so difficult to bear. The thing which jumps to mind is definitely the lack of curiosity. There is a distinct lack of curiosity in Israelis that is just so difficult to bear, so difficult to endure. But another thing that I'm sorry to have two answers here, but another thing is the mode it's our political mode. And it is a very nationalistic mode, but it is not communal. There is a very interesting thing in Israeli politics and how politics take place, that there is always this valuing of the national over the local, of an imagined community over those which actually do exist, do take form. There's a preference of the way we see ourselves in the state, as the state, and how that makes us feel good or bad, rather than actually taking care of our neighbors, of our friends, of people.
Can you ground that a bit, because it's a bit vague for me?
What did you ask? Sorry.
Can you ground that a little bit? Like, give like a more concrete example of what you're referring to?
Yes. There is the way we imagine ourselves as citizens of Israel is a way in which we are members of this larger community of Israel, of this larger unified thing. And in that, we aren't able to see ourselves communally, as communities. There has been systematic, how can I put this? I'm so sorry. There has been systematic preference for this over actually taking care of communities. To give one example, we haven't been able to integrate certain communities because we can't see their needs. We can't see their particularity. For example, Ethiopian communities, we're totally unable to see their particularity of where they are, even where they are in Israel, because we view ourselves as this abstracted out thing, and that thing is not really there. But what is there in that abstracted out thing of the state of Israel is actually our participation with forms of power, organizations and institutions. So those will vary from quite interesting ones like the IDF and quite boring ones. But where we actually meet this totality of an Israel is nowhere, because it is nowhere to exist. So we actually are unable to address issues in our lives because of this abstract thing that we would like to pretend is more true or real than what we can actually observe and qualify and quantify. Does that make any sense?
I think that made sense as much as it will.
Yeah. And what I do love about Israel, what I really do love about Israel is that people will protect you if you're in danger. People will usually not steal your stuff. It has been changing, but in several communities, but generally you will be safe in the street.
Awesome. Thank you, Quick. Simfa.
So one thing I like is the culture. I love Israeli culture. I'm not equally connected to all aspects of it, but kind of like the cultural ethos of Israel is one that I very much connect to and have a lot of affection and respect for, even if I don't necessarily like every traditional song. Something that I don't like about Israel, I think that's it's a bit of a zoom out, but like something that I don't really like about Jews in general. I kind of begrudgingly accepted that we are an ethno-religion, but if I had my way, we wouldn't be. I don't necessarily like that we're an ethno-religion, and I think it's very limiting in our understanding of ourselves. The fact that we are an ethno-religion, I think, is something that kind of makes everything more challenging. If I had my way, we would have been the Hebrew people, and our religion would have been Judaism.
Thank you. Thank you, Simfo. Mordechai. You're muted, Mordechai. You're still muted. Okay, I'll respond in the meantime. Maybe I'll start with the negative.
I unmuted myself.
Okay, go for it.
You know, all right.
What do you hate? What do you love?
I don't know. The word hate is like. I don't like the word hate. It's kind of like, to me, Israel's my home. Israel's my story. Hard to use hate. I'll say there's things in Israel I would like to see changed. Things in Israel that I think aren't helping us. The one thing which I think is like the most essential is that Israel needs to perceive of itself in truth as it really is. It's very concrete. I think it kind of touches on what the previous guy said. What was his name? Simfo? Who spoke earlier?
Simfo, yeah.
Whatever. Yeah, so I think that we have to understand, we Israelis, we Jews in Israel, and even non-Jews in Israel, need to understand why Israel was created, what purpose it serves. And it boils down to being a state and like a reservation for the Native Americans in somewhere in Utah or in Wyoming or Montana. It's a protectorate so that the surviving people, the surviving Jews who made it through this long diaspora would have a place to pursue their own destiny on their own terms and on our own terms without being dictated to by stronger, more numerous hosts, as it was in the diaspora. It's basically an end to the diaspora. That's the purpose it serves. We need to understand that, and that means that we need to figure out our relationship also with those who are not Jewish in Israel. It causes a lot of confusion because if I want to be an ethnic protectorate, does that mean I want non-Jews in this country to not have rights? And the truth is, no, they need to have rights. I think Israel needs to understand that the state of Israel isn't necessarily the Jewish people. It's intimately connected to the Jewish people, but the Jewish people is a little broader. There's Jews all over the world.
If you have non-Jews, maybe, loyal Christians, Bedouins, Druze, they're equal citizens in this country. They're only limited insofar as they can turn the state into a non-Jewish entity. Okay, that's the only limitation we put on them. But if they're loyal to this country, there should be no difference between them and us in our civil rights and even in our political rights and in the protections that every person deserves. The only time the protection of a citizen is in any way, I guess, limited should be when they threaten the welfare and the safety of the rest of the citizenry, or in this case, the purpose of the state. So you can have a perfectly, a Arab who's a doctor in Israel. He's never heard of fly. He's not a member of a terrorist organization, but he's a member of a political party that calls for the end of the country. He doesn't want Israel to exist as a Jewish state. He thinks it should be a state of all citizens. I don't dislike him as a person, but as a political entity, he's a threat to what this country is trying to do. And he should be treated as such. Doesn't mean he needs to be beaten up or God forbid or anything, but his political rights, I would be for limiting. But on the other hand, if he's a citizen and we have no evidence of him being such a person, then his rights shouldn't be any different than mine. That's basically, I think, something I would like Israel to understand. And the fact that they don't is not serving us well. It causes us to either allow traitors to dilute this country and make it less safe, or it allows the extremists to oppress and hurt loyal citizens of this country who really have done nothing wrong to us. So we have no evidence they've done so. And we have no reason mistreating them. And I do want us to be, even though I want it to be a Jewish protectorate, I want it to be as ethical and as moral as possible. I don't want to treat fellow citizens of other races and other religions the way Muslims in Islamic countries treat minorities, whether it's Syria or today or any other Islam country. I really want us to stand out in a better version than everyone else. And I think that's important. So that's something about Israel that I'd like to see changed. There's, of course, administrative things in Israel that I don't like. I live in a area, even though I was born here, and there's some things about America I think we can adapt, but those are all, technical things, technical stuff that, I don't know if we can get into how important, for example, the rights of the citizens, individual citizens, people, not just collective. So,
yeah, you cut out for a minute. You cut out for a minute, but you're back. You're back.
How long did where did I get cut out?
10 seconds.
Where was I cut out?
10 seconds
so
back.
I guess the thing, there's certain things that I appreciate, and about other European countries and even some Arab countries, I think that we can adapt, but those are just like technical things. The things that I love about Israel is basically everything. Like, I love the fact that this is my ancestral homeland and I'm with my people. I look at it myself and I look at our story as a long 3,000, even 4,000-year-old saga. And I'm, involved very deeply in the history of the region and the history of my people. And there's not a day that I don't wake up ecstatic that I'm with my people in my own land. And even though my people can drive me crazy with retarded takes and like really dumb decisions, but these are my people. I'm back with my family, and we're not being controlled by enemies or by just people who aren't Jews. So I really like that. And everything about Israel to me is still new. It's still fresh, and it still touches me very deeply. It's both the religion, the history, the solidarity we Jews have. We can have the biggest argument, and maybe Islamists will watch Israelis threaten each other with not serving in the military over some, who's going to be prime minister, and over some sort of legal decision. And our neighbors can only wish they had this level of I guess, a separation of church and state and legal, I guess, values of legality and structure. But at the end of the day, the way we come together to help each other out is something very beautiful. I think we have a level of group solidarity that I think is unparalleled anywhere in the world. I've lived in different parts of the world, and sometimes we don't appreciate the good things about us. So, like, anywhere you go in the world, if you're Jewish, you have a home, someone will give you a head start, someone will help you out. The fact that you're Jewish really, and you don't have to be observant, you don't have to be, your political opinions don't matter. If you're a Jew and you're in trouble somewhere in the world, the Jews there will help you, and the state of Israel will see you as someone that they should look out for. Someone mentioned the Ethiopian community. The Ethiopian community has been separated from the Jewish nation, according to their own history and according to many authorities, for thousands of years, like over 2,000 years. But they're being oppressed for being Jews. They're not citizens. By now, ethnically, our links are very, very weak, right? The religion we practice we both practice a form of Judaism, but it's barely recognizable. But there's a civil war in Ethiopia, and people are killing them and calling them Jewish or calling them, Judeans or Israelite or whatever. And that touches Israelis. Israelis can't watch that. And Jews in Israel will take a risk, no benefit to themselves. Israel, economically, militarily, at the time, it was very unclear why we need to have another group from another race with barely the same religion, but the fact that we're both Jews, even though we're separated thousands of miles and thousands of years, linguistically, the fact that we're both Jews means that we need to look out for each other and defend each other. And that's just an example. And I think that's something that's uniquely beautiful. And I wish, actually, that other nations had the same level of group solidarity, because every person deserves to have that warm embrace of the community. And I watch sometimes how in our region, how people murder each other and commit unspeakable atrocities to each other over doctrinal differences that I have with people in family. Like, I look at, the Sunni Shia split. It's not my business. I had this conversation with Omar in the past, but I watch how they treat each other in Israel, a disagreement of who's the prophets, continuation, and a few doctrinal and legal differences. We still marry each other's sisters. We still are the same community, and we'll have large debates over a meal. We'll never kill each other over that. And it's just so tragic that still exists in the world. And it's such a blessing to be part of a nation that's above and beyond all of that and still maintains that intense level of solidarity. And that also means that I would hold on to that solidarity and always protect my people, no matter what happens and no matter what choices they make. So I could disagree with Adar, because I think Adar is, naive, and I think he's maybe unwittingly helping our enemies by, politically supporting them and kind of joining in this war, a political war or media war against Israel. But he's still my brother. And I'm able personally, and I would be there for him. And I think that's something that I could say I really love about Israel.
Awesome. Thank you, Mordechai. I guess to wrap it up, I'll share what I like and dislike, starting with the negative. So Israelis are quite intelligent, but that intelligence is often packaged with arrogance. Now, the arrogance is often not felt, but as someone who likes to engage with my fellow Israelis about the conflict and to try to shift their perspective a little bit, it could be frustrating because on one hand, Israelis are intelligent and they think they know everything about the conflict, but their understanding is actually quite narrow. They know their narrative very well, but they don't understand the counter narrative well at all. So because of the space I'm existing in and the conversations I'm constantly having, that combination of misinformed arrogance is frustrating. What I will say, though, is over time, I think I've learned how to better communicate with fellow Israelis, and it just needs to come in a non-threatening manner. It's not to attack or to make them feel threatened. It's not to debate. It's simply a good faith conversation. If done in that manner, I actually have seen Israelis pretty receptive towards hearing about the other side. But again, it's something that does cause frustration when I engage in these conversations. What I love, and I think others shared this, is there's a sense of family here. You just meet somebody, you don't know them, but there's this instant connection. You know they'll support you. You know they'll help you. It really feels like family. And I'll go on to say, while this isn't true in many parts of Israel and Palestine where Jews and Palestinians are interacting, here in the Galilee, where I currently live, that familial vibe exists also between Jews and Palestinians. Our interactions are just overwhelmingly kind and warm, and it's beautiful. It's an example of what can be. So I'd say that's what I love. And with that, we're gonna wrap this up and move it over to the chill room. So I hope you all stick around and join. For those watching this on YouTube, I'll drop another link. If you're watching this on Twitter, you could find that in my bio. On YouTube, you could find it here in the description. I'll also drop it in chat. Join Discord, click the chill room, and you'll be connected. And to those here who are going to be in the chill room who have mod rights, I'm counting on you to make sure it stays respectful. But this is a solid crew we got here, so I don't think it should be a problem. And with that, we're going to sign off. Maybe I'll do like 3 more minutes closing remarks on YouTube, but we'll wrap up the Discord. See you in the chill room. Okay, cool. For those who have been watching this here, thank you all for tuning in. This was the first time doing such a concept, but I think we're going to do it more often. It's I thought this was pretty fucking cool. Let me know what you thought about this. Did you like it? Would you like to see it again? Next week, the plan is to do the same thing, but with a panel of Palestinians. So stay tuned for that. I don't know yet what time or day it's going to be on, but that's something we're working on. So yeah. And in terms of next live stream, let's see, what day is it today? Today's Wednesday, the 25th. Sunday for sure, but maybe at least one stream before. And with that, signing off. With love from the Galilee.